Welcome to Mixed Reality Fundamentals, enhancing the experience with UX. My name is Elliot. Stefano. Tonight, we're covering user experience, so it's going to be quite interesting. We've got David along as a guest speaker tonight. So just to start it all off, we thought we'd go into who we are. So we're from Expert, Stefano and I. Our company motto is to work together better, and essentially all of our products work with that. So we like to bring people together to collaborate and use things intuitively together. We more focus on business. So our flagship, which is where I was heading, product is the DigiTable. So it's designed to allow, say, a meeting to be a bit more productive, where you take people away from their laptops and their personal devices, and they have a central screen which they can all work with. It supports up to 60 touches at any one time. It's a very cool device, and we feel, and we've sort of, some of the research we got back from it was that meetings were more productive and people were more engaged during them. So our DigiTable Plus is the one came after that, and it's it won the 2014 Design Award, actually, which was really cool. So it was more of a standing table, whereas the DigiTable was a sitting table. But it sort of allowed those on-the-fly meetings, which might not be prepared so much as I just want to share an idea with you really quickly, or so it's a bit more convenient in that sense. We do a lot of other things too. So we design all the hardware for our DigiTables, but also we created a Surface Hub stand. This is a Surface Hub, if you're wondering. So for Microsoft, we've sold quite a few of those, which was interesting because it's a huge screen, and moving them around became quite a challenge for, not because we have one at our office as well, but we found it was challenging to move around. So we thought, okay, how can we make this easier? And so our stand was a cool little invention to allow us to rotate it and allow it to move around just on wheels, particularly because the idea of rotation when we're trying to get into our elevator was a nightmare. So it was very heavy. So that really helped, and we had a whole bunch of interest in that, which was great. We've developed for the Surface Hub applications, so with documents. Otherwise, we have mixed reality ebook on Kindle, and we have a LinkedIn learning course on there as well, the fundamentals. And that's it. No, Okay, so otherwise we've been trying to establish ourselves as people involved and committed to doing mixed reality. So we have our teachmemr.website.com, and through there we have been trying to push learning, so with companies, so whether that's a consultation or building something for people, that's kind of been our focus. So this is just like a fun little thing that we put together with the team. And we also have a few applications which we created. So from N-Squared Space Planner for HoloLens, both of those applications. It also works with Immersive, the same application from the Microsoft Store. Otherwise, screens and training. So general idea, allowing you to very quickly and easily move furniture, other items around. So these are all digital items. This room is empty. Screens allows you to have a lot of content around you at any one time, pulling up virtual content, things from the web, things that you might have loaded in there, and then training takes you through an experience where you actually learn to put a graphics card into a computer. So that's just an idea. We're trying to allow for an interactive way to teach people to do something. So lots of ways that could go, which is really cool. And otherwise, we, with Microsoft, created a whole bunch of mixed reality and Azure documentation for MS Docs. You can go and check them out. They're all free online, so it's the 300 level series that are on there currently. There's a lot on there, so I don't expect you to read them, but it covers everything from translation, custom vision, language understanding, machine learning, object detection, working with Microsoft Graph, bot, IoT, lots of very cool stuff, very interesting, and lots of people trying to get in on that right now. So it was great to sort of contribute that. Check that out if you get a chance. Otherwise, we'll post these, by the way, if you want to have a look at the slides later. Yeah, it's fun.
So I thought I would go through some of the most interesting news, even though it wasn't really much last month, but the most interesting one I found, well, one of the most interesting one was a new feature for the new Windows Insider Preview, which is called Flashlight, that allows you to use your hand controllers to sneak peek into the real world while you're actually wearing the immersive headset. So, well, first of all, the Insider Preview is an option that you can enable on Windows 10 to kind of access those new features that are kind of more developer friendly. They might be a bit bugged, and so they always they ask you to exercise caution when enabling it. But it kind of extends the functionalities of Windows 10, not just for mixed reality, in many other ways. For the people that are a bit more courageous to try not fully released software. But yeah, this was one of the features that was on the latest build, which kind of probably more helpful in terms of safety, having the opportunity to kind of sneak peek in the real world if something happened, or if someone is calling you out and see who it is, or see if you bumped into something. There is already a feature that is that consists on a net, on a kind of a virtual net that kind of warns you when you get close to something solid in the real world to avoid like bumping into chairs or bumping into a wall. But yeah, this is kind of an extra layer of safety, I guess. Oh, what if he plays? Why not?
Flashlight on. Flashlight on.
You guys would feel free to go maybe around. You want to see that?
Flashlight
Sorry. So it's quite interesting. That's really where the mixed reality comes on board, and where you can kind of cross between the two. And that also makes you wonder, what if you could use this kind of functionality into your own application? For example, the HoloLens sensors at the beginning, they were completely hidden behind an API. You can kind of abstract and have a look at it and use at a high level, but later Microsoft actually released released an API that could actually harness those sensors and the response of those sensors in a much deeper level. So you could kind of expect maybe this to you to be able to implement it into your own application, and it's another layer of UX and design that would be interesting. A few numbers. So this was an article from Bloomberg in 2015 saying that 13 million VR-ready PCs were in the market. Considering as a benchmark an NVIDIA GTX 970. Now, how do they get these numbers? Mainly from Steam. Well, NVIDIA probably released some numbers about their sales, but the majority of analysis that gets done on people having PCs at home that can handle virtual reality is done through Steam, because Steam obviously scans your computer, knows what kind of hardware you're running. They know that I have something like 120 million people registered. If you're kind of a gamer or if you use virtual reality application, most likely have Steam at home, so it's fairly accurate as a number. In 2018, 53 million, so almost 4 times as much. Actually, I had a nice chart about it and didn't bring it on because I showed it last time. But if you guys go on Steam, you can see clearly all these numbers coming up. Another interesting thing is that, YouTube VR app got released for Gear VR. It will not be not really particularly interesting, but just to expose the actual platform that already exists, that is already compatible with Daydream, Vive, etc., which are all like major VR headsets. And YouTube, considering the kind of platform it is, it's interesting to see how they support virtual reality and make it more native. Super Medium, it's really interesting too. They recently got quite some money from investment. And they're a browser that runs completely in VR. And that kind of makes you think of web content being experienced in virtual reality. You can already download it. If you have a headset, you can already download it and try it. Now, there have been quite some rumors about the next iteration of the HoloLens. We often catch those companies submitting patents and then always rely on they might just do it for fun. But we kind of expect the HoloLens to have a next iteration, likely to come out the first quarter of next year. And the first objective of that iteration will be to increase the field of view. I don't know, how many of you have tried HoloLens before? Okay, so you'll have the chance to try it later. We have a pair here. You might know, so for those of you who have tried it, something that is quite underwhelming is a bit the field of view.
Yeah, so this is my first time using the screen. Experience of mixed reality. So in this discussion, let me know, because I don't know how much you guys know and whatnot. If there's anything that you don't understand, just let me know. We'll go through it. So we're going to talk about the challenge with mixed reality at the moment. And then we're going to introduce user experience design. Some of you guys are experts at that already. We might do our design activity, and then just talk about how we can get involved in community and learning a bit more about the technology. So, a little bit about myself. I'm a UX designer, user experience designer. I've been at General Assembly, which is a tech school, and we've got a full-time UX course. So I've got a few students here tonight. So basically what we do is we try to understand the problem or the experience from the user's point of view, and then design from that. You can get a lot more value out of that. Part of my role was to actually get a few businesses involved, and we had our students actually go on projects and try to solve problems for those businesses. That's my role. So the challenge with mixed reality and new tech in general is, so this is from Gartner, which is a research organization, and so they've got this thing called a hype cycle. So every time new technology comes along, you get a huge peak of interest, but then you start to realize the limitations and what you can actually use it for, and then you kind of get this disillusionment before we actually develop some use cases and actually innovate and get to a point where we're kind of using the technology. So they're kind of saying from 2017 that virtual reality is kind of along here, which I kind of agree on, because I feel like we're kind of at a tipping point now where the devices are kind of becoming cheaper, the technology is getting more advanced and more immersive, and it's becoming a little bit easier to use. So this year we've got our first standalone headsets, so you don't need to put a phone or anything in it, you don't need to have wires or anything, just put it on. And I think that's about $300 Australian when it comes out. So, and that's quite a good experience from there. You got your mobile ones, which are your pretty basic ones, over towards the expensive side. So we've got the HoloLens on that side. Hopefully in the future, then the technology will kind of come down and be more accessible. I did a bit of research and looking at reviews and whatnot for the various devices out there, and a lot of people had these things to kind of talk about in regards to being comfortable for them to wear and have an immersive experience with that. So there's she's a marketing researcher, Patricia House, I'm not sure how to say that, but she released a report I think last week, quite recently. She's kind of looked at Australia and all the AR, VR industry and all the companies, and since 2016 or so, like the number of agencies and companies has grown dramatically. So there's a lot of interest in this space. So it's a little bit about, well, what can we actually design for? What experiences can we actually design? What problems can we solve? because as we can see, it's a space that's building. And from that report, she said that there's a lot of applications in 360 video production, real estate solutions, education, games. Of the other industries that I looked at, there's other industries that are using or trying to apply this technology to various degrees of success. And just to put a few examples out there, this was at Google I/O 2018, so they're kind of playing around with the idea of a walking navigation, an actual character avatar that will show you around the streets. This is one with Microsoft, so it's kind of like Skype. You can have a video chat there going on, and you could be solving a problem and you could get advice from someone directly there as a hologram. So they're basically wearing the HoloLens and looking through that. And then that person can be accessing, what they're seeing on their computer, so it's cross-device. So that's some potential for that. Microsoft Layout, so another use case is you can actually plan and move and rearrange actual things without doing it, which is great for the back. So that's another good application. 360 video with HoloTour. This one's the enthralled furniture app, so you can put furniture in real time. Has anyone used a app similar to this?
Okay, yeah, fine.
How do you find
Yeah, it's not too bad.
the YouTube app?
Bring your furniture to your own house and test it out in your own place.
Was it
With your camera, with your smartphone.
was it helpful in making a decision? Yeah.
You just bring the catalogue on the floor and
Yeah.
people have a special tag and you use that tag in that furniture.
I think Amazon have a app as well that you can kind of preview your items that you're going to buy into an actual surface in AR. Which leads us into design thinking. So it's kind of bad being at Microsoft and showing Apple, but hopefully those guys didn't pick around. This was back when the first iPhone generation came out and they announced it. And Steve Jobs was like, this is the space of smartphones at the moment. There's smartphones which have buttons that you can't really press. They're like smaller than your thumb size, and so they're so hard to use. But they're smart to a degree, and so he kind of figured out that there's a space here where he can create a smartphone with an interface. It's just a screen, so whatever you're interacting with, it adapts to the application that you're using, right? So each app that you open up, it's got different buttons and whatnot. So it's adaptive and it's easy to use. And so that's the kind of innovation that we're talking about. So why is UX important? iPhone didn't invent the smartphone. Facebook wasn't the first social network. There's many other search engines for Google. But they're kind of improving the user experience and maybe simplifying the process. And so UX design is kind of disrupting industries at the moment and creating a more personal relationship with customers. So just a bit of a definition, it's a problem-solving approach. You look at the user's perspective to design from there. It's quite based in research, and generally you'd be exploring a problem that hasn't been solved before, so it's quite innovative in that sense that you could do something like that. So where things don't really work is on the other end, if you're designing from the systems out way, you don't really consider the experience in the design, but if you're factoring in the experiences first and then designing around that, then you can have a much better experience for the person that's actually going to use your product and your service. And so that's what user experience tries to accomplish. And so we work, as UX designers, work with the final user, the business, and also we have to factor in, okay, well, what technology is possible and how can it solve our problems? And funnily enough, we look across we don't just do like UI. Like we look across digital and physical. And if you're thinking about mixed reality, now our world is our platform for overlaying and putting digital designs on. So it's something that we have to think about. This is just a. You guys know this is. Some of you guys know this. It's basically the process that designers will go through where they're trying to research and explore. They'll start off with a problem and then they'll research and explore like all the aspects around it, and then kind of narrow things down to maybe like the highest priority problem or the more specific issue at hand, and then they'll kind of converge again and come up with all these great possible solutions. But then getting feedback from users and whatnot, you'll narrow that down to a concept. And what part of the process is we try to test that process early on, and then that saves, because if you get it wrong when you're towards the end of finishing the product, it can be so much costly in terms of time and money. And that's what UX tries to avoid by trying to test prototypes and concepts early on.
Especially when you think about input methods that are not very conventional, it might not be really important to test where you're going to put the quick button into your 2D application on a screen, because people kind of assume that if you put it top right, people will find it there, or top left, even hit red with a little cross. People are more used to that. But when you think about moving in VR, for example, those are very core mechanics that you implement very early and that you want to test early as well. Because if those are not comfortable enough for the user, then you're going to pay a very high price on reworking the whole system of movement, which is kind of core, at the end of your application, at the end of the development phase. So those key, even picking up objects, throwing objects, pinching, the very basic inputs that you assume you don't need to worry about on a normal 2D application with the mouse and the keyboard, you need to worry about at the very start on a mixed reality application.
Yeah, and it's like there'll be things when once you put it into the hand of the user, they'll have all these problems that you never would have thought of. So that's why you want to get it out early and try to avoid those things later on. And so we, like generally as a UX process, we focus on one feature at a time. And that's usually the most important or most prioritized feature. And so it increases user satisfaction, helps you solve the right problem, and clarifies the direction that you will head in with the product in regards to the users that are actually going to use it, and then it saves time and money. And so it's quite a repetitive process where we kind of repeat that process and refine our solution once we get to that stage. So this is just a few of the things that we kind of do as part of our role, which could cross over and apply into AR and VR. There is a lot of exploration in that area in Microsoft and HTC, Apple, Google. They've all got their departments working on AR and VR. And so it's kind of like there's no conventions at the moment, so people are just kind of figuring that out and figuring out what works and what doesn't. So everyone's kind of maybe having their models coming out soon with what's working for them. So if it's new technology, early adopters will shape conventions. So if you're interested, try to get on board and try to play around with it and see what you can do and what you can't do. I've already talked about this. You can't really predict what's going to happen, so just trying to get people to use your design. And in design, we actually have a broad rule of thumb called heuristics that we generally use to kind of, gauge how well the design is, but they're not like kind of fixed guidelines. This is an example of one that can kind of cross over from design, which is, is the design learnable? Is it easy to accomplish task? Will you remember how to do it if you walked away and came back? If you made a mistake, how easy it is to come back to it, and how satisfying it is from there. So then I kind of looked into it, and some of the designers in this field right now they actually will. The designers are using Sketch. So if you guys are unaware, it's a program that you can do like 2D designs. So basically all the stuff on our 2D screens, a lot of people use a program called Sketch to kind of design for. You can actually get a plugin, and I know that Google's doing that where they're importing those designs into a 3D program, so with Unity, which you guys use. That's your main thing. And then you can actually put out a prototype quite early and test it. So that's what's going on. So these are some possible tools. I think I've seen this article, so thanks for that.
Especially Unity, the most recent version has the whole VR setup rig set it up for you. You literally just press play and wear your headset, and you will start in a scene with the hand controllers already set up. You can already pick up objects, and so it's incredibly easy nowadays with very basic knowledge of Unity to get something, to spin something up and start putting objects around and already being able to pick them up. Interesting. That's on Unity 2018. Well, before you kind of needed to set up the code to use your hand controllers to detect them, to show them, and now they've pretty much streamlined the whole process.
Yeah, and it's interesting because you got like 3D design, 3-dimension design, spatial design. Then you got like 2D, which you're importing into a 3D thing. And like I watched one of the Google videos, and there were basically, you know how we're moving towards simpler designs, flat designs. So if you look at your phones lately, it's all kind of very simple and not 3D kind of looking. They tried to make the UI like 3D in the VR environment, and I think it's quite hard for the brain to process, so it wasn't very comfortable. So funnily enough, those 2D, type interfaces, translating that into the VR environment, keeping it 2D, it works. So that's something that can translate over from 2D to the virtual reality. So let's give this a go. So we wanted to think about, because the real way to kind of, bring a technology into the forefront is if it's actually useful. So we wanted to pose the question, can it actually solve problems and simplify processes? So can AR, VR really help me? What problems do you guys think we could actually solve using this type of technology?
Like the medical field, you train people how to do operations or something like that.
With training? Yeah. I think there's a big advantage of because it's so immersive, and because you're kind of simulating you're doing something, and some people they learn faster from actually doing. So that's a strong advantage of it. Any other ideas? Planning?
Like room layouts, measuring the room, bringing furniture in.
Yeah.
You do all that.
And I think there's an app on mobiles now which you can get a ruler, an AR ruler, and I think it's accurate to like 1 centimeter or something around there. So it's interesting that it's getting better in terms of mapping the environment.
I was just going to say, one of the things that they're talking about using VR for is when people are disabled or unable to, or they're bedridden or whatever. It's a way of sort of taking them places that they couldn't get to in their current medical condition. So I don't know, that's not a user need that maybe haven't really even articulated before this technology.
I think there's already applications that might be used around psychological treatment. So when people have phobias and things like that, they can use VR, AR to kind of increase their tolerance level with that situation when it's not really real.
It's actually one of the applications I've tried. It's to cure arachnophobia. And so they present you sitting on there is a desk in front of you, and there is a voice behind that is going to tell you, that it tells you, there's going to be a little spider that is going to walk on top of this bench from left to right. It's not going to jump on you, it's not going to do anything else but appear from the left and move all the way to the right. The spider is very small, stay calm, there's no need to panic. And it's difficult to recreate such a controlled environment in real life, right? Because you can't control where the spider is going to go. But in virtual reality, you can really reproduce the spider that looks like a spider, moves like a spider, right in front of you, and you have that feeling of being just right in front of you on the table, and control his movement from left to right. So yeah, that's an example. I don't know, fear of heights, for example. In virtual reality, you can put someone on the edge of a cliff without no issues whatsoever. And obviously you wouldn't spawn it up on the edge of a cliff, but you can lead a person through the experience until it helps. Something more recent I've seen, for example, people that went to war and have PTSD. So kind of facing what they've lived, and some of them needed to kind of go back there to some degree to partially relive the experience they faced. I'm not a psychologist, so I wouldn't know what to approach the problem, but sure, you can do that.
It's really interesting. A friend of mine's a psychologist, and she says that she had people with agoraphobia, so fear of open spaces, I think it was, in crowded spaces, like in street mall, for example. Yeah, one of the ways they treat them is to actually take them in a more controlled environment, and basically, like you're saying, up and see that they panic, but they realise, I can survive this, and that's part of the cure. So, something like VR, but be a safe exposure.
Yeah. This is the core idea that you can replace reality with something completely artificial. Sure, it can happen in virtual reality, but there are limitations. There are severe limitations. One of those is, for example, if everything around you is constructed completely artificial, you can't be free to move around. You bump into the physical stuff. So that's where the UX also comes, like having a good idea of how to design your application to make it immersive, but at the same time make it not dangerous and not accessible. Even in terms of UI, for example, there is a massive difference, as I said before, between designing the experience of using a normal UI on a screen and using a UI into virtual reality. Some of the suggestions could be little text, try to limit text. For example, voice is excellent in virtual reality. We've used a lot, some of the Microsoft services, for example, speech to text, which uses a background of machine learning to identify what the user is saying, the bot framework, giving the user the chance to use voice to trigger some behavior into the application instead of clicking or looking for the button, or that could be one of the things. And also using voice to lead the user. Instead of having text where the user has to look at to learn about something, or have voice that guides the user into doing a certain activity.
We're kind of moving into that area with machine learning and computer vision, where a HoloLens, for instance, and probably your phone, can identify what's in the physical world. So with that in mind, you could essentially have contextual-based objects, or not so much menus, but rather than having to trigger something yourself, so I need to see this, he just understands that you will want to see that, and you'll want to be able to do something with that, which there's a lot of power there. I kind of see that's where this will move in the sort of hopefully near future, where our applications are less task-based and more contextually based, so they understand what you want to do, and they'll take you in that direction of their own. And UX is a huge area for that, because understanding what you want is hard, and making it feel comfortable and simple.
What's the real difference between AR and mixed MR, mixed reality? Because AR is able to overlay a full image over, so you can't see through, fully opaque, but it can also be transparent, so you can see through.
Yep.
So what's the actual difference between AR and mixed reality?
So you basically got two ends of the spectrum. You've got AR, which is digital overlaid on top, of the physical world. And then the other side you got VR, which you're fully immersed in a digital space.
Total environment,
Yeah.
new environment.
And then in between, where you can have like digital interacting with a mapped out physical space. And so that's a little bit different than just an overlay. So I think like Web of Friends is still in the early stages. HoloLens is already there, which we'll probably get to play with soon. Yeah.
You see, for example, when I showed the flashlight at the beginning, that flashlight functionality, those devices obviously becoming more advanced and able to kind of mix virtual with augmented with reality, real reality, together to different degrees. So you might be able to just open a little window into the real world and have a look at. So I know you want to call that, yeah, they coming up with a new word every day, I guess. And so yeah, I guess mixed reality is really the in-between and all the shades of.
You might hear XR as well, extended reality.
Yeah.
That's been thrown around as well.
Yeah,
So,
But you can do that with an AR app. What you see on Microsoft HoloLens, if you've got another AR app, you can actually do the same thing as that HoloLens. You can overlay the whole screen and have your own environment.
Yeah. So if you take an AR app and instead of putting an hologram there, you cover the whole thing with holograms, there you go, you have virtual reality. So the degree of having something that overlays reality to everything being artificial, that's where the mixed reality comes along.
Yeah, so some people don't call it mixed reality, they still call it AR.
Really, mixed reality, it's the name that Microsoft
Came up with.
came up with to brand their own devices. That specifically, that is what mixed reality is strictly a Microsoft word, but you know, it used on many different ways to.
I suppose too, augmented reality was based in that it doesn't really direct you in your environment so much as it's overlaying it. Mixed reality communicates both backwards and forwards. So I know phones are getting better and better, and I suppose people are still saying it's augmented reality, but it is really mixing your environment. It's becoming more than just an augmented reality. It's understanding that it's a table, or this is the floor. And I think earlier on, AR was just simply I can tag something in space, and that's getting better as well. You know, like you can understand that space and you can walk around it and understand it in a virtual sense, spatial sense. So that I think that's kind of been moving, and as we said, as Stefano said, Microsoft sort of took that and made it a new word, I suppose. But AR, yeah, it's sort of been moving. And then, yeah, you get these kind of confusing terms. XR presents itself as well, and depending on who you ask, that can be the umbrella term which encompasses all these things, or it might mean just an extension of what you're currently doing. So.
And I guess it's important to understand the spectrum or be aware of it, because when you design your application, you want to know what your capabilities are and what the limitation of the technology is. Once you identify the problem and you say, okay, I think this VR will be perfect for this. Once you have actually made sure that VR is the solution, or AR is the solution, what devices are on the market, which ones are accessible in terms of money as well, and what capabilities they have, and how can they solve my problem. Because obviously, all of this is still at very early stages. Even though it's been out for a few years already, we are not yet to a point where we have these amazing, fantastic, seamless products that we just put on and walk down the road, and we're not there yet. But we're on the path, obviously. And we were discussing this today, like, whenever you read virtual reality is dead, or it's absolute nonsense in my opinion. There is no way that someone is going to say, sorry, mixed reality or virtual reality, I don't want to hear about it. Because the technology has started, there are definitely scenarios that virtual reality and augmented reality have a good place and can solve problems. So yeah, it's definitely far from.
The only way it can sort of go away is if something replaces it as well. So like, it's always going to be there, regardless if people want to stop thinking about it. That's fine. But it'll get better again later on, or hopefully soon. So that, it's not going to, even in the worst, it won't fade away, because people are still interested in the area, they're still developing things, and it seems to have, in the last few years, it's been in jumps. We've got access to better technology, more powerful graphics cards, and easier access. Phones can now run a whole bunch of stuff, and even with the HoloLens, it's an amazing device, but like $7,000 or something to actually have the commercial experience. Whereas your phone can very much do very similar things. So that accessibility has come a long way. And you see companies all the time, even that the phone can map the floor and understand your physical space that's a huge jump. It's going to continue happening, and I think machine learning and these cognitive services are really going to be the power behind that.
I think I've got some examples here. So this was something that I saw at the Good Design Awards, which happened quite recently. So basically, in Brisbane, they've got these ferry terminals where they dock, but due to floods, they got destroyed. So then they redesigned them. Basically, there was a stand there with a VR device, and so you put the VR device on and you walk around, and you can walk through the actual terminal and then see what happens when the water level rises. And when it rises, it detaches from the shore, and then it just floats, so it won't get flooded. And so the reason why they developed that was so that they could communicate that better with the stakeholders and whatnot, and the architects, and they just couldn't do it sketching. And so it was just much quicker to do that. Plus they had like some 3D printed prototypes, which they could physically show people as well. So in combination of that, I think it was a good way to bridge the gap and make communication a lot easier. So I thought that was a good thing. This one is from a company called Vantage Interactive, and they were at UNSW, and they worked with miners to develop a training program for dangerous situations where sometimes the safety is not great there, and so that's an interesting one from, I think it was like quite a while back ago, 2008. So that's quite an old example, but a good one. And yeah, so like I spoke to the company and I asked them for their insights and feedback into their projects, and they said that for their users, the experience needed to be simple. So they just wanted to put it on and get whatever task they wanted to do done. They're not gamers, they don't understand the hardware, they don't understand software, whatever, they just want to put it on and get it done. So that's something interesting. They said that the text people didn't really care for or didn't really look at all. So that's quite interesting. And they didn't like cluttered interfaces like UI and things everywhere. So they just wanted to focus on the experience and the journey of the story. So I thought these things were quite interesting. So in terms of getting involved, I think it's good to kind of get the conversation going, and talk about these things like, is VR dead? Like, what's the problems with VR? How can it be overcome? And so I think it's just good to keep that going. So if you want to say something in the meetup online in the chat, if you want to present some ideas or whatnot, I think developers can kind of see, is it actually feasible? So some of the designers in the room, you can kind of communicate with these guys. There's a website, UX of VR, that pulls together a lot of resources and videos on what people are actually doing in this space right now. So that's a good one to explore as well. And maybe follow some designers that are actually working in this space and see what they're doing to solve problems. And then there's a lot of hackathons as well. So for people that don't know what a hackathon is, it's basically like a 2 or 3 day event. People get together with designers, developers, and then they come up with ideas to solve problems. There's specifically VR and AR ones out there, which leads us to using the devices ourselves, getting familiar with them. Is it time to?
Oh yeah. Before we go into it, are there any questions or things you want to talk about?
Yeah, this is another use case for VR. I was working with a company, doing business development for a tech company, and I wanted to pitch via Forces Command, which is the training unit for the Australian Army, to pitch a VR solution to them. And they're all over it. And obviously it's really great for them because the soldiers are in high-risk situations and they need to make sure that their training overrides their instinct. And VR really gives them the opportunity. So yeah, the military is something, that's not something people, focus towards in technology, but at the same time it is making, I guess, more fair and efficient or saving soldiers' lives, however you want to pitch that, but the military gets investing very heavily in that space as well.
Because you can't really prepare them on like I think show them a video like it's something you did.
They have to be immersed in the situation in order to know how to respond to mission critical situations.
Yeah. We were sort of throwing around ideas earlier about firefighters, police, because there's situations not only to learn from, but we even have a chance to try to navigate. So how did this particular police officer get through this, or how was this firefighting? Was this situation solved? Or even just the fear and the intensity of certain situations. Otherwise, you're not going to.
Sometimes it's not even about training anyone. It's not about interaction. It's about exposing someone to a certain environment, just to have an idea of what you'll have to deal with. So you really don't need to interact with the fire. You might just be immersed into an experience that puts you in that situation when you maybe, there is a car on fire or there is a threatening situation. Just to have an idea of what it looks like. Unless you want to set up the forest on fire just to show people what it looks like, but I don't think that's really an option. So you can recreate all of that artificially. Think of astronauts.
Sorry, I just came in at the moment. I just wanted to say, obviously the government policies and other stuff are kind of far behind on these technologies. So how do you think that's going to impact the ongoing growth of VR and other stuff? Because I've known people they say it's kind of like a gimmicky stuff still. And if you stay in VR like a gravity-less, probably a gravity movie or a game, immersed over there for 8 hours straight, and when you leave the VR experience, the body's going to collapse because it's just not going to work properly. So there's a lot of other DJ professors or maybe other ones to think about how does the policies coming up with the technology advancements, how you guys are or the whole industry is mastering it.
I'll show you the story. I was at GCAP in PAX a couple of years ago, and PlayStation VR was starting to show off the new tech and the new games. And there was the government stand where they do ratings for video games. They had no clue. They really had no clue. I went there to talk about it because I had a little idea for an horror game, which I couldn't finish because I would scare myself. Because I would create the environment and I'll be it's too scary for me to develop what inside now. I know. But at the time I asked them, okay, so what's your point? How are you going to judge my experience if it's a scary experience? They had no clue. They had no idea what VR was. It was 3 stands behind, there was a PlayStation VR, no idea what it was, for real. I was shocked. I was okay, so I guess someone has to have an heart attack before they interview. That was my experience over there. And along this point, at GCAP I had there was a very interesting panel regarding harassment in VR. In VR you can see someone's hands, and you can get close to someone, and you can make gestures, right? Or you can go and enter in digital contact with some other avatar. And that could be an issue. And that's something that no one talks about because it's not really there yet. But at some point, you'll have people interacting in a social space with avatars, able to move their hands and able to interact with each other. And I'll let you think about what it could happen. So how do you stop that? And that comes down to mostly the developer experience. The developer needs to take that on board. This kind of UX is still talking about user experience to prevent these kind of situations. In a chat, you can mute someone if you don't like it. But what are you gonna do in VR? Are you gonna like some people were talking about obscuring people's hands when they get closer to someone else's, but that leads to other issues, and there is not really a solution yet. Like obviously that problem is not there yet as much, so it hasn't been thought through. But these are all issues that if you develop for virtual reality, augmented reality, you will have to think about, especially if you work on multi-user experiences.
Just shoot it.
One bullet, dead, killed the avatar in that scene. But yeah, Oculus, which is owned by Facebook, definitely going that direction. They have a few applications where you can move around and interact with each other, and yeah.
There's so many devices around. How do you know what's a good one, what's a bad one? You know? It's not, the reviews aren't. It's really hard to tell, isn't it? I mean, there's the main ones you show there on the screen.
There's reviews, so if you look up, well, I'm mostly on the YouTube scene, so there's some reviews that I look at, and they're pretty, I don't know, pretty straight in the feedback and whatnot, and saying what's not good and what's better. Some of them are like saying, for example, that like the ones with it's big on the back, it actually the counterweight is a lot better, and so it's more comfortable. And then so like they'll say like after how many hours, like if it's still comfortable and whatnot. Yeah, so I think just look out for those reviews of people that actually use it and are honest. Yeah.
I don't think that, personally I don't feel like there is much of a difference in terms of, oh, the Vive is great and the Oculus is really bad. Like, I wouldn't say that. They're all very much on the same line. Like if you go high end, the immersive headset, the Microsoft immersive headset, the Vive, the Oculus, they're all very similar in terms of graphics, in terms of comfort. Some more, some less, but the experience is very similar. There isn't that huge difference in terms of graphics or something.
There's things that you won't know, like the reviews, for example, they say the level of fogging, like they would have known until like somebody actually tells you that what you actually experience it yourself. So I think keep an eye out.